Hello and welcome to this special edition of the Business of Story. I'm Park Howell. On April 24th in this year of COVID, we aired an episode that has become our most downloaded show in 5 years. It's the story of my brother Chris Howell and his late March bout with the coronavirus. His daughter, Dr. Elsie Bigelow, also joined us on that show as the two of them shared what happened the week that led up to Chris being admitted to Swedish Hospital in Seattle, Washington, his 2 days in ICU, and 4 days in recovery. Since then, we've had so many people who heard the show ask us how Chris is doing. In fact, in answer to that question, our brother Steve recommended that we do a follow-up episode, as Chris has been navigating the road of COVID long hauler with health challenges still to this day, 6 months after the fight with COVID. But thankfully, he's getting better. And given now that we are experiencing a second surge in COVID, this is just a reminder to us all to take care of ourselves, wash our hands, social distance, do the things you need to do to keep yourself healthy and those that you love. Now, if you haven't heard episode 248, the following 12 minutes will provide an abridged version of their journey with COVID. If you are familiar with Chris's story, then feel free to jump ahead to, as Paul Harvey would say, the rest of the story.
Well, after that, I had a good night's sleep and I woke up in the morning and I didn't feel right. Something was going on and I had terrible diarrhea the first thing and my head was all stuffed up, and the funny symptom I had was my scalp hurt. Anytime I rubbed the head or scratched it, man, it was terribly sore. But I brushed all that off as allergies. I live under a cedar tree out here that's just been spitting pollen for the last 2 weeks, and I've had issues like that before. I didn't have a whole lot of energy on Monday or Tuesday. I just kind of, and it seemed like things were getting worse. I had a little fever. I never got above like 100.3 on my fever, but I could tell I was getting difficult to breathe.
I called my dad, I guess, on Monday, and I was just checking in on him, seeing how he was feeling. And when he says something is wrong, it kind of piques my interest. So he said, I'm really tired. And that doesn't really sound like him. And I guess I just really noticed on Wednesday that I should be concerned, but I can't be there. I only know what he tells me, and sometimes he's pretty stoic. So I think my mom coming home and really sounding the alarm made me realize it more.
I laid in bed all day on Friday. Zero energy, had a fever, zero appetite, was really difficult to eat. So I was shot. It was terrible. And then Saturday, the 28th, was no better. I literally laid in bed all day.
And then on Sunday, I was getting multiple phone calls from my mom, who was really sounding the alarm and the only one really there seeing him, because my dad was just trying to push through it. And my mom really took the lead and decided that enough was enough.
Yeah, at that time, I knew this wasn't going to get any better. And if I stayed home, it might be tragic. So at that point, yes, I gathered some stuff up and got in the car and away we went. We were going into Seattle to Swedish Hospital, of course, and we got to take a ferry and then, drive a half hour into town. Thank God there was nobody on the roads that day. So it takes about an hour to get there, and she just put me in the passenger seat with the mask on, and it was the longest hour of my life. I was just a blob over there. The sun was in my eyes. I couldn't stand the sun. I had a hat on over my head, and an hour trip seemed like it took 3 hours. It was a rough trip in there. And we got there, and they were immediately on me. Mary went in and told them I was here, and they came out with a wheelchair, wheeled me into the ER. Put me in this little bed in this little, like a little dungeon ER room. And the doc came in and took all my vitals and immediately put me on oxygen. Thank God. That made me feel a little bit better because I was getting some air finally. It was like you're breathing out of maybe an eighth of your lungs. So you had these really, not gasping for air, but really, really short breaths. So it's just like you just couldn't get enough air, and your head was hurting, everything was hurting on top of that. So you're thinking about that pain, you're also thinking about you can't breathe.
So I got the report from mom, who had talked to the nurses, because for mom, she just had to drop him off at the ER and hope she was going to see him again, which was very scary. But she told me, Dad's on the ortho floor, this is his nurse's number. And then I get a text, Dad's in the ICU. That's when I started getting really concerned.
And I think at that point I was at 6 liters of oxygen, which is a pretty high number.
Mm-hmm.
And then they just left. They left the room because these nurses and docs, with how great and responsible and wonderful they are, did not want to be in my room very long. So they came in, did their job, and got out. And then I was just there, laying there, and they kind of faced me out, and it's a big sliding glass door there that they come in through. So the whole wall is glass. So I was looking out at all these nurses monitoring me the whole time. And if they had to communicate to me, often they'd knock on the window and yell at me, or sometimes they'd call on the phone. So yeah, they put a DNR sticker on my door, and that's when I knew it was real.
And Elsie, a DNR sticker says what?
Do not resuscitate. And so for me, not being there, I was really concerned. Why does he have a DNR sticker on his window? But I was talking to his doctor specifically. I said, hey, I'm a 4th-year medical student. So they know that I know most of what's going on, or I'm able to speak the language at least. And I was like, why does he have a DNR sticker? That's normally someone who's, 85, 90 years old. And if he were to have a heart event because of this, we would have to take time to put on full protective gear. And that is time lost to save him, if that makes sense. So he wouldn't be oxygenating his brain, and there's more likely for brain damage. If patients get to that point where they are having cardiac arrest, it's a pretty poor prognosis if he were to be resuscitated. And so that's why in this hospitalization, as uncomfortable as it was for me, he was DNR. It made sense.
I was in ICU, and I got a call on the phone from the hospital there, and it was a lady asking if I'd be willing to take this trial drug, remdesivir. They administered it through my IV, and it takes about 30 minutes, for it all to flow into you. And they did that at 6:30, and I remember that because every other time I got it, it was at 6:30 at night.
He wasn't feeling 100% better, but his body was starting to show signs that it was healing. So that's when I felt a little bit more comfortable, especially when I would call the nurse and she was like, yeah, he was on 1 liter of oxygen today. I'm like, that's great. That's a step in the right direction. And I know for my dad, he really wanted to just, muscle through it and get out there and try no oxygen overnight. And that didn't end up working sometimes, but it really felt good when he was out of the ICU.
Well, at that point, they moved me up, and I was just really glad to get out of that ICU. But I was still basically chained to my bed with all the stuff going into me and whatnot. But it was just nice to get into an airy, nice room. And I was on the COVID floor, and I was one of 25 other patients on that floor. So I was down to 1 liter at that time, and I said, all right, I'm going to sleep tonight without this oxygen on. Then about 1 o'clock in the morning, and comes running back in. Oh, Mr. Howell, we got to put that oxygen back on you, because all the alarms are going off, and I was beeping and thought, then I thought, I'm crushed. I don't know how long I'm going to be in this hospital at this time. And each of those days I was in that room, they were taking blood from me, 3 vials, 4 vials. And then the day before I got out, they came in and took 15 vials of blood out of me. And I think a lot of that was for that remdesivir testing and stuff, but that was a lot of blood. And then the next day they came in, it would be Friday the 3rd, and the same nurse came in and he said, well, I'm going to weigh you now. So somehow they weigh in the bed, and I was 160 pounds. I had lost 15 pounds in those 4 days or something. Wow. And now I hear these other guys talking on the news. That's the Corona diet. And the nurses told me everybody loses 15 to 20 pounds on this thing. So, and that was another shot in the gut. I thought, oh man, what is happening to me? Everybody that would come into your room was very guarded. I mean, they wore two of everything, right? And they'd come in and they'd do their work, and you could tell it was uncomfortable. They didn't want to get it. I mean, they were very professional and awesome. But then when they'd leave, they would take the outer layer off and leave it in the room and then go out the door. Well, on, was it Thursday, I guess, this little lady that I'd never seen before kind of backs into the room. And she's all geared up. You can't see her at all. And she doesn't even look at me. And she starts cleaning. It kind of breaks me up. Just a sec. She starts cleaning the room and just not paying any attention to me at all. And then she starts, she cleans the room for maybe 15 minutes, and she walks out the door and she says, "My name's Julie," in a really broken Italian accent. She says, "I'm praying for you." And she left. She was like an angel. Excuse me. And then she came back the day I was getting released. Same deal. Walks in, cleans. And I mean, with not a care in the world, not even where everybody else was guarded, she wasn't. And then she goes and she's cleaning up my sink, and she says, "Yeah, I'm not going to be here this weekend. I got to go clean my garage." I said, "Oh, you got to go home and work for free, huh?" She kind of laughs and she says, "I'll pray for you all weekend, and you won't be here when I get back." And she just left. It was like an angel from God. It really gave me relief.
So, Chris, take us to the day they finally let you go. What was that like for you?
Oh, that was wonderful. I took my last dose of remdesivir the day before. So I had 4 doses of remdesivir, which is generally given out in 10 doses. But apparently it worked so well on me, they got me out, right? So the doctor came in the next morning and he checked everything, and he said, and that night I did sleep without oxygen. And he said, "Yep, we're going to get you released today," and which would be Saturday. I was out of there by about noon. Best thing in the world was walking out those hospital doors. Beautiful day, mountains were out. Just, it was so nice.
And I bet Mary had a gigantic grin on her face when she picked you up.
Oh, she was ready to come and get me for sure.
Chris and Elsie, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Park.
Thanks for having us.
We just got through that abridged version of what you went through, Chris, which must have seemed like months, even though it was a few days in the hospital. And we got to the point in your story where you just got out and you talked about what that felt like. In hindsight, can you take us to that moment when you stepped out of those 2 doors?
Oh, back out. I took a deep of fresh air breath as I could with the biggest grin on my face, and so happy to walk out of there and just enjoy the outside.
And did you feel like you had licked COVID at that point?
Well, no, because I was still feeling pretty shot, actually. I don't feel today like I've licked COVID, really outright.
Well, and that's why we have you back, because so many people have asked, how's your brother doing since your show number 248 aired back in April. And so we thought, well, let's come back to you and Elsie, and let's hear what it's like now that you've been, I guess, officially deemed a long hauler, and you're still dealing with this well into October, November.
Yeah, correct. Got out of there in April, and first couple months were really bad, actually, fatigue and no oxygen. Well, my oxygen saturations were good, but, it was tough to breathe. And that lasted for, probably almost 4 months now.
And do you still have those effects?
Not too much. About, I guess it was last month, I felt like I got over a hump. The fatigue was way less. I mean, almost no fatigue. And I felt like, I'm through it. I won. But, every morning I wake up to this day, I can still feel my lungs and they're not right, and trying to figure out if I got scarring or not and those sort of things.
I guess all in due time. And Elsie, you and your husband Spencer had just started your residency out in San Diego when this all went down. What can you take us a little bit through what your life has been since Chris has gotten out and what you've been seeing in the hospital?
Yeah, so both my husband and I started residency, and I actually started in the intensive care unit, taking care of quite a few COVID patients. Unfortunately, some of them, are not as lucky as my dad to walk out of that hospital. And it was really real seeing those patients on the ventilators there. And Spencer has been taking care of patients just on the floors, and we've been pretty busy in the hospital, and the patients seem a lot sicker. I don't know if that's just me thinking that, but it feels like patients wait to come in for care because they're nervous about being exposed and then come in when they're really sick. So we've been doing our best to stay positive and find little things that we can do. But, we're really kind of stuck at home a lot of the time because we're not allowed to really spend time with our co-interns or do other normal stress relieving things.
Yeah, talking about being thrown right into the fire in a residency, very unnormal circumstances to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. Normally in the intensive care unit, it's pretty quiet in summer. At my hospital, they have 2 units and they normally close down one in the summer. But we were on divert this summer because of all the COVID patients that we had. If that just kind of speaks to the volume.
Can you give us an idea of what your last few weeks have looked like? How many days in a row have you been working?
I've worked the past 18 out of 19 days, and yesterday was my first day off in that time frame. So
you're you're a bit of a long hauler, just in a different way.
Yeah, definitely good days and bad days. I try to start each day with a positive attitude because when you're working that many days in a row, it's all you can do.
I can imagine. Now, Chris, you got out of the hospital and you were back home, but then you had some blood clotting that happened. Can you take us through that?
Yeah, a week after I got out of the hospital, I had basically I had a very sore leg and ankle, and I was speaking with Elsie at that time, and she's like, "Oh, Dad, you better go to the ER. I think you may have a blood clot." And so that night I went into the ER, and sure enough, after a CT scan and ultrasound, they found out, I had a blood clot both in my leg and in my lungs. So then they put me on the blood thinners after that. I'm on Xarelto, and I've been on Xarelto ever since I got out of that hospital.
And how are your symptoms?
Now?
Yeah.
Way less fatigue. I'm doing a lot better that way, but I still feel, and I don't know if it's scarring or blood clots in my lungs. My legs feels good. I can feel the vein, and it's still hard, but there's no pain there, or redness or anything. So that's all getting better. I'm going to get that checked out in a couple of weeks.
And so to remind our listeners, you are a farrier,
I'm
horseshoer,
yep.
And you've been doing it for many years. When were you able to get back to work? Because that's a fairly strenuous line of work.
Yeah, I got out of the hospital in April, and I didn't trim my first horse till the end of June. And the June 29th is when I tried to get back to work, and it was very difficult. I'd go and trim a horse, and I'd have to take time to breathe in the middle of it because I'd run out of breath. And by the time I got done, I'd come home and be exhausted and lay around for a couple hours before I could do anything else. And that's improved quite a bit now, slowly, but I'm doing still just very few horses, and I don't get the fatigue like I did then. It's much better.
What was it like when you went in for that first trim after all this? Did you kind of feel like, oh, this is great, I'm getting back to normal? And then was it kind of disappointing or depressing when you went through that and felt like,
Well, no, actually I was more concerned to see if I could even do it, but my clients have been so good and they understand that I've been struggling. So they took care of me, basically. Said, take all the time you need and just relax, and I'm here, and I can be here for a couple hours if you need me to be. So they've all been really good for that.
Elsie, have you been seeing long haulers coming back to the hospital, or do they maybe they don't come back to the hospital? They go to their general practitioner, or what are you experiencing with your patients?
I haven't seen any long haulers. I've seen maybe a few patients who I know have tested positive for COVID in the past, but I think I just see more of like the general medicine type of patients because each patient gets swabbed for COVID in the emergency department before they come in. So I'm not seeing the long haulers. I've seen maybe like 1 or 2 COVID patients that are long-term, but that's about it.
Are you guys experiencing a second surge over there too?
Well, it's really hard for me to tell because as an intern, I actually don't take direct care of COVID patients, just for saving PPE, like personal protective equipment, just for like when there would be a second surge, which we're expecting. So I'm not really sure if we're 100% surging. Right now in San Diego, restaurants are open and gyms are open. Not that we really go to those things or have the time to do that, but
Chris, coming back to now a few months after, let's get you into June or July of your recovery. When did you feel like you were going to be in this for the long haul, that it wasn't going to go away anytime soon?
Oh yeah, June and July. I mean, when you go to work and you come back and you got to sleep for 2 hours to make it feel, somewhat normal, I guess, is when the main it clicked in on me at that point that this thing just keeps dragging on, because I'd go for a week or so and feel pretty good, and then I'd be shot for 2 or 3 days, and then I'd go for 10 days and feel pretty good, and then bam, it would come back and I was shot for another 3 or 4 days. And since then, since June into July and August, that started it backing off. So I'd go for 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks feeling good before the fatigue hit again. And now, gosh, it's a month or so. And every now and again, I got to take a day and just relax. So.
And what about your strength? Are you getting that back, or is it harder to even build muscle mass again after all this?
Well, yeah, my strength is way down. It's slowly coming back, because I'm trying to Mary and I do, we try to walk as much as we can. And I've been riding the bike and just working around here. I do things the hard way to build myself back up, but man, it's really so slow, and I am concerned because there's no new findings coming out about these blood clots, that they can get into every organ and it can affect your heart. And I don't know the shape of my lungs yet. So that concerns me. So I'm not overdoing anything right now.
And what kind of testing have they been putting you through?
Well, right now, I haven't got much testing at all. They're testing me for my antibodies. I go into the UW every 60 days and draw blood and spit in a vial and that sort of thing to see where my antibodies are at. And I've got all the good antibodies, so that's all positive. I go back there again in December for my last checkup. They're just trying to see how long these antibodies last. But right now, I'm covered with good antibodies.
And the UW is University of Washington, which has been right at the epicenter of all this stuff. It seems like all the big network stations go to the UW to find out what they're learning about it. So you are right in the middle of that. Are you some part of a case study with them? Do you know? Or
well, yeah, a case study with the antibodies, but not with the recovery study. The Swedish hospital contact me for a recovery study, but that kind of fell through the cracks, and I haven't heard back from them yet. I just got a phone call or on here, and it may be them finally contacting me. We'll see. It's kind of a long, drawn-out process.
And how about plasma? Have they taken your plasma? Anybody to study that?
Yeah, well, the last time I went into the virology clinic, I went down to Bloodworks Northwest to donate plasma, had that all set up, and then I get in there and do the questionnaire. They found out that I was on Xarelto, a blood thinner, so they weren't going to take my plasma, so I can't give plasma.
Elsie, why is that? Why would a blood thinner affect a plasma test?
It's because he would be actually donating the plasma to another patient. And so you can't give a patient blood that's already been thinned or plasma that's already been thinned.
I got you. So it wasn't just for studying. It was really actually for donation as well.
Yeah. And my dad was really excited to donate. He talked about it all the time. And then he finally got to the appointment and they had done all of these questions. And then for them to just realize that he was on blood thinners, very frustrating.
It was kind of frustrating. I'm glad it was close to the virology clinic, so it didn't mess up my time too much.
You didn't have to come home and take a nap after that, I guess.
No, it was fine after that one.
Yeah. Elsie, and I know being a doctor and all, you can't be prescribing, but what have you seen or heard maybe that helps a long hauler overcome this? Or do we know enough yet to help them overcome this more quickly?
I don't think we know anything or much of anything at all. I think we're just realizing that long haulers exist. So there's so much to study. I think what's challenging about medicine is that it takes so long for us to do research on things because it's needs to be very validated and controlled in a controlled setting. And so that's why it's taking longer for us to come out with results. And talking about things like vaccines, for example, normally that takes years and years to develop a vaccine, and we're under this crucible to make it very quickly. So it's challenging. To answer your question, I don't know if there's anything for long haulers. Just appropriate outpatient follow-up and like following up with your primary care doctor and seeing what they recommend in terms of follow up with specialists. Like I know my dad's going to go see a cardiologist for his heart after he had the blood clots.
So you are now practicing at Scripps Mercy in Hillcrest. And over the last few months, you first started in the COVID wing, but you've been doing a lot of different things on rotation, correct? What are some of the areas you've been working, and have you seen any impact of COVID in those areas?
Yeah, so I started in the intensive care unit and then I switched over just to the general medicine floors. So anyone who's sick with like a pneumonia or like a kidney infection. For the general medicine floor, I haven't really seen anything specifically with COVID besides the fact that I think people are coming in a little bit later and they're a little bit more sick. The next rotation I had was actually orthopedic surgery. And I've seen that a lot of surgeries just in general have been delayed. So if people were going to get something replaced or something fixed, it's been pushed back for them. And I think that's probably really frustrating to a lot of patients to have their care delayed and pushed back when they're in really bad pain or something like that. I know that the ORs aren't working at 100% full capacity because of that. So yeah, and then I just did another rotation of general floors and I switch over to nights tonight. So,
and I imagine you probably have lost some frontline workers to this as well.
Not specifically at Scripps, but I know that there was a resident in Texas who was 28 and she was working in the ED and she passed away because of COVID, which is very real. She was a very healthy woman, OBGYN resident. And that's scary. It's really scary.
Well, we're moving into November. And Chris, what, from your experience in this long haul that you've been pushing through with COVID, what do you anticipate November and December like for you and your health? And what do you think the new year holds for you?
Well, I think I'm going to just keep improving. And I mean, it's such a slow improvement. I'm going to give this thing an entire year before I really get overly concerned that it's going to stick with me forever. But I think I'll get a lot of answers when I go to see my primary care doc and the cardiologist and get some CT scans and recheck bloods. And I got a lot of testing to go on in November. And I think that's going to answer a lot of questions for me. At least that's my plan.
And it sounds like the main thing you want to get back is that endurance, that ability to go out. And we've got skiing coming up right around the corner. You're a big time downhill skier. How do you think it's going to impact your skiing?
Well, I've got a hunch this is probably a good year because they're really compacting the ski season and the people. So it's a good year to slowly work back into skiing again. I'm doing my best to get into shape for that. I mean, actually, I went out and played 18 holes of golf last week, which was fantastic. We didn't walk, we did ride, and I felt pretty good after that, actually. So that was very encouraging. And then we got the duck hunting season coming up as well, and plan on doing it the best I can and just keep going.
Get back to life the best you can.
That's what I'm aiming for.
Awesome. And Elsie, what do the next few months hold for you?
Work. I go to night float for an entire month. And then I'm working in the intensive care unit, interestingly, in December into January over like the holiday timeframe. And so I'm really interested to see what the overlap with flu season is going to look like and how busy we're going to be. Yeah, I'm just working.
Yeah. And my final question for you, Elsie, and I asked this on my show last week from the folks over at Banner Health that were here. we talked about the second surge that we're experiencing, and I asked them if it had something to do with the flu season or the changing of the seasons, and their thought was no, it's behavior. People are getting complacent again and think that we've got this thing licked, and so they're packing places and they're creating these super spreader events, large, medium, and small, and that's really what the uptick has all been about. Do you agree with that? Is that what you guys are saying there?
100%. I 100% agree with that. Yeah. I just mentioned the flu season more so because flu is seasonal, but I don't believe COVID is seasonal whatsoever. And I think we as a society might get a little bit complacent with where we are and frustrated because we are so isolated and we're now being taught to fear other people, which I think is really challenging. We are such social creatures, just being human. But this is 100% due to, if we get another surge, due to our interactions with other people and not protecting ourselves and protecting those who are most vulnerable.
So if you want to hear the entire story with Chris and Elsie, it's show number 248 that aired back in April, and it talks about everything that he went through from this abridged version you heard here and what Elsie and Spencer experienced traveling across the country when they first got news of Chris, and we take you blow by blow what went down. So great show number 248.
All right, Park, I wanted to just thank you for that last podcast that we did together. It was the most educational thing that I've heard from other people. They all comment on how much they learned about this COVID and how devastating it can be. And that I think that helped them help protect themselves more than anything. You know, you can hear anything in the news, but you don't know the guy that had it. And now that I'm the guy that had it, they realize that, yeah, this is a serious thing. And they did take very serious care. And so I do appreciate the last podcast you did.
Well, thank you. And I'm so happy that you and Elsie came out because you kind of coined yourself the poster boy for COVID. You're not one to generally be out front like this in the public. Haven't been comfortable in it in the past, but you said, I want people to learn from what I experienced. And then the YMCA up there came to you and you did some online work with them. And can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, through the last podcast, they did contact me. They had what they called a COVID cafe, where several people got together, some with COVID, some without COVID, and just shared the experiences and tried to educate even more. And this was a national thing. People from all over the country were in on these Zoom calls. And I did that every Wednesday for about 6 weeks or so. And I met other COVID patients that I am in contact with to this day, just comparing notes and that sort of thing. It was an excellent thing for all of us, I think.
And I guess it was just a way that they were able to communicate and educate their community by bringing in people that had suffered through it and been through it in all varying degrees, and you were part of that.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And it was just really good to, it sounds weird, but it's good to talk to other COVID patients. It kind of makes you feel better about your progression and how you're doing as well. So that was really helpful for not just me, but I think for everybody on that call.
Yeah. Have you been doing anything else besides that, or just kind of pushing your show out there and doing that work with YMCA?
Yeah, mostly just doing that work with the IMCA, and I've been pushing the show a lot, and very good response from it too. So,
what's the most surprising thing you heard someone tell you about your story after hearing it?
Just about how devastating it was, because they don't realize, how bad it can be. And I happen to be the guy that got it, so bad. And yeah, that's mostly what I've heard.
Yeah. Well, you may well have saved some lives in the process, Chris.
Well, I think all of us did, and it's just not me. It's other people that have gone through this too. Buddy Al, same way. He's really been pushing the show, and everybody like that.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you two again for being here and sharing what you've been going through the last few months. Really, really important stuff. If you liked what you heard on the show and feel like that you and your friends, family, or loved ones could benefit by hearing Chris and Elsie's story, share both show number 248 with them and certainly this episode, because last thing you want is to get this disease. And if you are lucky enough to get through it, you don't want to be a long hauler either. So feel free to share this show. And if you have lost someone to COVID, our hearts go out to you. I know we were blessed on our end because Chris got through it, and we just want to share that with you all. So thanks for listening, and I will see you again next Monday. And until then, remember that the most potent story you'll ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So thanks so much for listening.